We get a lot of these kinds of meetings done where people are talking about new monies and they're talking about how they're going to be spent, and you have a say in the way that's going to be done, and then they go and do it anyway in their own way. And we just don't want to be too cynical about it, but we would hope that the feedback that is being given here at the beginning of this and with the rest of the communities that are coming online later on in your trips, that you're probably going to hear the same kind of feedback, which is that I hope that this time you'll listen to the First Nations communities, because they're the ones that know what they need. They're the ones that understand it. All the people that you see around the table work very directly with their people.
We don't need to get people that charge $1,000 a day to come in here and tell us what we need to do. That's not working. It hasn't worked for all these years. I'm 64 years old. It never worked for me when I was in school, and it sure ain't gonna work now. Our children need to know who they are as a First Nations people. When we do our fish, when we go and catch our fish, when we go down and get our devil fish, they need to learn that is so important to us, And the schooling is important if they want to go, yes, but get information from us. Find out how we can do it together. How can we work together? Don't avoid us. That's the only way it's going to work, if you include us completely and listen to us and trust that we know what is right or wrong for our people.
There's a bit of a contradiction here. Well, maybe not. You can clarify this for me, but the National Chief and the AFN and the other major First Nations organizations get up on their pedestals and they say, we represent all First Nations people on or off reserve. And they literally engage in conflict with CAP and other national organizations on that particular issue. And yet, as a First Nations person living off reserve, I see very little effort made to provide any kind of service or programming to me off reserve. And now I know it's an issue of resources, but first and foremost, there has to be some kind of strategy. There has to be dialogue and engagement with the urban First Nations and Aboriginal community. The process must be there, and it must be a due process. There must be accountability in the process. And so, yeah, I could see this money, hopefully some of it will be directed at putting that in place. I mean, we are your people, and we need to talk to us. And I'm glad that you're here today and starting that process. And I hope that what I've said will lead to something real, something that's on the ground. You will engage with UNN. You will engage with other Aboriginal political organizations to achieve that bigger goal. If you don't do that, then we're right back to square one and we're going to go nowhere. So thank you very much.
Each community will have a different priority, and I don't know how we're going to address like healthcare, healing, and education, and language and culture, and I don't know. It's a daunting task for sure.
To ensure fair access for all nations, some nations would have the capacity to be making all kinds of submissions on their behalf, and others wouldn't. So I think that there needs to be real fairness in whatever process is put together. I think there should be budgets put in place for directors. There should be yearly reporting, a good reporting system for all the nations to know that their money is being spent wisely and it is going through a process approved by all the people.
Obviously, our communities have been hard hit with our fishing resources and our fishing depletion and licenses and such. And you look at those short-term objectives when it comes down to government relationships with our First Nations. They were proposal-driven projects and they weren't effective. Our community members are still at home. We never built the capacity off the money that was granted to our people, and if we don't get a long-term commitment, a lot of the times we'll get things just up and running, and then the money's gone. And then from there, what are you left with?
Most importantly is looking at how we can work together to maximize the limited funds. And yes, 100 million does sound like a lot of money, and I hear different leadership saying, well, let's round it off. There's 200 communities and you divide it down, so we got $500,000 per community and it's done. So I mean, I think we all would agree that's kind of a ridiculous way to look at this amount of money. So how do we maximize these funds? And it's working with our leadership, and it's working with an organization such as this, and providing the feedback that is going to provide the opportunity for our leadership to make the best decisions.
We believe that the new relationship fund should be kept whole and focused on major undertakings, rather than being divided up into many smaller pieces, smaller programs, amounts and programs, which will render this initiative as just another small band-aid for First Nations in the province. The Ktunaxa Nation recognizes and agrees that we need to invest in more capacity building, in the improvement of health conditions, in the needs of children and families, in self-governing structures for First Nations, in the development of physical infrastructure for our communities, and other essential programs. However, the use of this fund as a whole in one specific area will result in higher returns than if split up into many smaller programs trying to address everything and actually not achieving substantive results in any area.
Provincial and federal governments do not get re-elected giving Indians money. Ask Paul Martin. Ask Sir Wilfrid Laurier. Ask Glenn Clark. It's a huge risk for Gordon Campbell and that government. We all understand they're buying some peace until the Olympics. But what do you think is going to happen in 2011? It's going to be another 100 million? No. I think we may squeak another 100 million out of them before the Olympics. But I think this 100 million has to be invested.
It's not going to develop capacity of sitting in a bank account, spending interest over the years. So it's how do we get maximum benefit out of the funds that are presently available to us?
It's easy for us to go and get a bunch of money and then go and put it away and try to store it and try to grow it and to think about the future. And our troubles keep on growing today. We keep on talking about our children tomorrow, but we are people living today. And I think it's really important for us to start thinking about that.
I'm worrying from a social worker's perspective, if we invest the money and look to interest earned on those dollars, how in fact would we be helping with socioeconomic development in our home reserve communities? And that it be more of a grassroots program and not top heavy with wages paid out to consultants and high paid management.
It may be that you could invest in individual mortgages on reserve that are secured. So it doesn't mean that your investments are going to be restricted, that there shouldn't be and couldn't be some impact in the Aboriginal community from those investments. It need not sit outside of the community. The interest earned could go back to these funds. You would get a better return and still have a major impact on your communities, and you'd have a major economic impact because of the spin-off opportunities that are created at community level in providing your products, providing the skills, the infrastructure, etc.
I believe that investing in ourselves is really important, but I feel that empowering our chiefs and councils or decision makers, however those decision makers end up being through treaty, is probably the most important thing. So developing the platform and the institutions that they can make decisions on their lands and resources, so then they can start generating revenue sharing benefits, so then they can start investing in other programs.
Those First Nations already with the capacity to create that proposal are the ones that get the money, and those without the capacity never receive the money. So they're still left, they're even further behind, because those that have already moved ahead are further ahead. You got to really look at giving everybody the capacity. I mean, hire a consultant to develop the proposal first.
And do you think,
if you don't have the capacity within your community already to do that?
And as a consultant of the trust, come forward with recommendations on what that band actually needed for capacity building, because this is a tremendously important fund for the bands. This is what's killing us right now, is not having the capacity to be able to take advantage of the opportunities that we've got in front of us. And all of the bands should be given the opportunity to do that, and to develop their own resources within the band to be able to take on that challenge.
We run a huge risk in having all these consultants all over the place. A suggestion might be to hire the proper staff to assist communities to put their proposals together.
$100 million that's identified as capacity development. The description that we received talked about the billions of dollars that are needed to actually bridge the gap, and that's the reality. And so if we start looking at this as a source of funding for programs and services, it's woefully inadequate and is not going to do anybody any good in the long term. What we want is to have a piece of the growth of the economy in this province, and we need the capacity to be able to do that. These issues arise out of Delgamuukw and the enforcement of our Aboriginal rights and title, the failure of the treaty process to bring treaties into this province up until this time, and the need for this province to move forward economically. And Squamish has had the benefit of experiencing some of this through the Sea to Sky and the Olympic processes, and we've received substantial benefits. But what did we have to do to get there? Well, we had to produce a land use plan. We have to be in a position where we can defend and assert our Aboriginal rights and title. And what we experienced is that it took money to do that. That's part of the capacity development.
One of the things we need to say is that this is too short term to start doling out money in 2007. I practice 6 Ps. Does anybody know what the 6 Ps are? It's proper preparation prevents piss poor performance.
Because with the strategic plan, business people are going to look at me and say, hey, that's quite a plan you have there. How can we be a part of it? To me, that's the investment we need to do now for our future leaders to be able to carry through for our children. And that won't only be on the reserves, that'll be for the urban as well.
we look at this development plan and what it means to us is big business, and that's the way we're going to approach it. As a nation right now, we're trying to separate business from politics, and that's one of the major issues that we have to deal with as First Nations. And the banks are very excited about looking at that process about separating business from politics. When you do that, the doors are going to open.
We've had several meetings over the last year, and we recognize that violence against women and children in our families and communities, and the men who are usually the abusers, all of those people need a lot of help, a lot of healing. And if we ignore that when we talk about this $100 million, we're going to build capacity on a very weak foundation. I'll get to my recommendations, but as leaders, you cannot deny that our communities need this healing. Because my community is no different from yours, no different from all those Aboriginal women that I've been speaking to over the last couple of years. They'll build it without us if we don't have input. Our recommendations, they form a subcommittee, especially dealing with healing, so that the people associated in those fields can sit in the background and give the trust board recommendations when building the strategy around healing. Because you heard the socioeconomic gap is in the trillions of dollars probably. This is $100 million. How do we even start to heal with $100 million?
I think a lot of reasons a lot of these social problems exist is because a lot of our people don't get paid decent wages and they're living in poverty. To me, it all comes back down to economic development. Do your research. Economic development, creating your own money, pays for everything. I don't care if you're talking a cultural program, a language program, powwows. I always say everything costs money. The federal government and our own people have bought into that. Spend most of your time and efforts on social problems. And you know what's going to happen? You spend most of your time and effort on social problems, you're always going to be chasing social problems until you develop economically and have an economic development base and start creating jobs and making your own money. We got to change that mindset from spending money to making money. When I talk across the country, I talk to Native people about we got a mindset change here. We got to stop from this mindset of spending money to making money. And that $100 million should be used for making money.
If we don't really find who we are in a healthy way with our languages and with our spirituality, it's hard for us to go into economic development. I see so many of our communities work into different developments, different economic developments, and it becomes a failure because people are not healthy. People fighting amongst one another. That was not our practice before. Everybody had a voice.
What we need to do as Aboriginal people is begin to heal ourselves, because we can't capacity build if we're living in unhealthy communities.
Many years ago, the Indian Act was introduced, and it discriminated against Aboriginal women. And I can use my family as an example. There were seven women and 2 men born to my grandparents, Robert and Florence Davidson. There were 7 girls, 2 boys. 5 of the women married non-Aboriginals and were forced to leave the reserve. So that created, way back in the 50s and the 60s, my family living off reserve. My theory is that the majority of the people living on reserves are descendants of men, and men, and men, and men. The majority of our councillors are men. The majority of the chiefs are men. I don't see anywhere where the women are going to fit in. Who are leaving the reserves at the highest population because they're being beat up by their husbands, because they're being raped and they're being murdered? Where is the place for the woman who gets abused by a council member? Where is the place for her? Because that is where capacity needs to be built. Who is going to be that link between the ones who cannot speak for themselves and cannot get elected on council because their families aren't large enough? That is the reality of what is going on in this country, not only in British Columbia, but in this country.
I would like to start out by saying, in the success of the individual of Aboriginal ancestry comes the success of our nation. And in order to do that, we have a whole pile of issues that we need to deal with. We are a small population in British Columbia. I can speak for BC. Yet we make the highest population on Skid Row and in the prisons. So how are we going to use some of these monies to address those issues? The migration from the reserves, where do our young people end up? Where are they accepted? It's in the downtown side. That's where I work. I see a lot of it.
History has shown that if you're in foster care, you're going to end up in jail. And you need to go back to why that person is in foster care and why the family has fallen apart. Why not start there in supporting? A lot of it is service driven, but it's never in prevention. If you assisted that parent or the parents on their problems that they have and raising their kids, that chain won't start.
We did a quick study last year in Kisprax, or where I come from, the area. We had 35% of the students were FAS. Another location in the eastern interior, we found 65% were FAS. So we're literally talking about thousands of people coming up within the next 5 to 10 years that we have to accommodate.
Oftentimes the kids don't see themselves what they should be. You tell them to look in the mirror and what do you see? They say, well, I see a dumb kid who can't do anything. But my honest opinion is that I don't see that. I see a beautiful spirit. I see wonderful kids who are capable of doing really wonderful things in life if they want to. And it's just something that we really need to do with our youth, is to show them who they are. Even if they are living away from home, we need to create a home away from home for them, where they do feel that they are beautiful spirits and that they are capable of doing whatever they want.
So our top priority for this new relationship agreement should be that social economic. And where I see it written in these papers, it's always saying, you know, capacity building for natural resources and land use, and then social economics. And I think that should be our priority first.
Some communities, in their haste to make money, in their haste to join the rat race, in their attempts to fit our communities into a mold that we've criticized for a few generations now, this new economy, I think we're making a mistake, because it's killing our language, it's killing our understanding of who we are. And I think that's critical. I was reading the other day that almost half the languages in the world are already on the brink of disappearing. Ours are amongst them. So when you were asking what is important, what can this money do for us, what can this trust do for us, I think that's one area that I'm hoping we pay attention to, is language and culture.
The one thing that I'm going to express here today is to back up the people who express the concern for who we are in our language. Our language is who we are, and I'm hoping that it's an important part of the spending of this money.
One of the things that I see, I guess, is the First Nations doing a balancing act to accommodate the Western society. Balancing between the two worlds, where we're getting left behind in the minds of Western society. Leaders, due to lack of respect for our form of governance or culture, they don't understand our cultures. They don't understand our way of life. And our culture is hunting, fishing, gathering, bear picking, feasting. It's our form of governance hasn't been recognized, and we also do land stewardship.
As we know, as First Nations people, each and every day, every week, we're dealing with forestry, we're dealing with Front Counter BC, we're dealing with government. The government is trying to wash its hands of referral and consultation. What we've done at Upper Nicola is develop what we call Shuktuktam, caretakers of the land. We're using the ancestral laws that our ancestors have passed down and implementing them into our FRA, into our forest stewardship planning. But we want to incorporate this at a provincial level, to where all the bands are going to benefit this, because everything we have is tied to the land. Who we are comes from the land. We have songs that speak about this. My grandmother, when I was growing up, a lot of the times it said, "Son, this is who you are. picking berries and hunting and fishing. It wasn't until I was a lot older that I understood that. We're losing a lot of our areas, our spiritual areas, our berry picking areas, our hunting areas. Each and every one of us knows and understands that. You know, our elders are appalled by what they're seeing today.
If you can arrange to keep the Aboriginal leadership of this province quieter about environmental issues, about concern for Mother Earth, about environmentally irresponsible development, and it only costs you $100 million to do that, and you're doing more than $100 billion of development, well, that's cheap at twice the price, isn't it?
That whatever objectives we're trying to achieve through this new relationship trust has to be premised on building healthy lifestyles. With healthy lifestyles and healthy people, then we can do proper and better planning for our future generation.
Keep it simple. This fund should not be looked at as a be-all and end-all for all of the challenges that we face as First Nations. It is an initiative by the provincial government to address capacity building and economic development within. So it should stick very closely to that and not concern itself with a lot of the top-heavy stuff that we're hearing in these meetings.
We recommend that a key goal of the New Relationship Fund must be to leave a lasting legacy, since we all hope that its impact will outlive its existence.